Hey, welcome, everyone. This is the ComicBase live stream. I'm Pete Bickford, your host for the next hour, give or take. And today we're going to be talking about my favorite top five, and it's a broad category. So in that five, there's probably like about 25 total tips. But my top five tips for entering your comics fast. I was talking to a guy yesterday on a tech support call, and which by the way, we actually do pick up the phone on these things. And it once again, it just kind of refreshed in my memory. It's like, yeah, I've been doing this comic-based thing for 30 some years, and you feel like you know most of the tricks. Actually, Steve Dassinger, one of our customers, probably knows all the tricks, but I'm probably the second most conversant person in the room as far as what the program does. But it's funny because you forget all the things that you learned along the way that make it so it's really fast to enter your books using the program. And sometimes it pays to go back and explain some of the stuff, and also shed some light on some of the ways and just the ins and outs of why do it a particular way, because if I'm going to be honest about it, entering your comic books is the crappiest part of being a comic collector. I mean, it's just between logging them in and filing them. If there was a way I could just give that up to anybody else, I would do that in a heartbeat. And back when we were all in one big office back in California, I got people that I could just assign to do these things for me. But unfortunately, I'm out here now in my own out in Franklin, Tennessee. The rest of the guys are still back there in San Jose, California. And so when it comes to the filing and everything, it's pretty much me at this point. So I want to show you the things I do to make it so that you take as little of your time as possible to get your books entered, and share the good love on that sort of thing. But anyway, before we get into it, first of all, I'll say thank you to our moderators in the house, Mr. Gregory Hecht, and also welcome everyone who's here. Richard Scott, first in the house. Aura Viejo from chilly 19 degrees in Minneapolis. It's like, oh, but sunshine. So, 19 degrees in Minneapolis is a friendly hello. It's, put a negative in front of that, and then we're starting to get into actual winter. So maybe February will give you more of what we're used to back there. Mike Beam joining us here from Vancouver. The Department of Comics is here from Florida. Excellent. Deg Wren, welcome. And let's see here. And Greg has a follow-up from one of the episodes from last week's live stream. Okay. Okay, just read the comment and got that. Ed's joining us in the house as well. Excellent. And yes, please, if you guys put comments in the chat, please put them to @ComicBase TV. It helps make them stand out. That way I know to actually read yours out loud as opposed to like it's just a note for Pete or things like that. And we'll take it from there. Oh, and Rob Weinberg, welcome to that. Welcome to the show. All right. So let's get into things a little bit. So like I said, this idea comes out of a deep and abiding hatred from the actual mechanics of filing comic books. Except, God help me, I've never actually been completely comfortable with just living the digital comic book lifestyle. If I could do that, which by the way, ComicBase will even file those for you. You can just drag them into ComicBase and they get sorted properly. You can even read them from within the app. Anyway, if I could lead the comic lifestyle just by myself, then I would not be bagging, I would not be boarding, I would not be filing, I would not be doing boxes and labels and all the things that we have to do. Unfortunately, I just like the darn comic books. What can I say? It's a failing in me, but I suspect one shared by a lot of us. So with that said, how do we get our books entered faster? So let's just get to tip number one, and I'll just get straight to the point. Number one, get yourself a barcode scanner. And by that, I mean a real physical, no fooling around thing that you hold in your hand and it makes beeping sounds barcode scanner. Not a phone, not some kind of weird app. No, this is like saying, hey, well, I don't need to use it, keyboard on my computer because there's a virtual keyboard. I could hit all the characters with a mouse. Yes, you can do that, but don't. It makes everything terrible. Anyway, you need a barcode scanner with comic books for a couple of reasons, and you need a real one for another couple of reasons. But let's talk about why you need a barcode scanner at all. And it kind of comes down to this. I was reaching behind me, and the thing I've learned over past experience is it's always good to have a pile of comic books within reach, because I'm always going to end up talking about something on the show, and it's good to be able to just go, I actually have some comic books. But anyway, on the back of every comic book. So this is Marvel must-haves something or other. And if I were to peel it open and look at the tiny print on the inside, it might say something Marvel must-haves some August through September issue 20, whatever. It might tell me the title. It might not. It might tell me which variant it is. Probably it wouldn't, and so forth. Modern comic books, let's face it, they just suck as far as labeling them goes. Once upon a time, life was better. There was one series called Avengers. If you ignored the 1963 one that was the Gold Key thing, talking about the Emma Peel, and stuff. But when you were talking about the Marvel Comics one, it was just the Avengers. If you had issue number 6 in your hand, you were looking at Avengers number 6. End of story. We do not live in that world anymore. We live in a world where every series is the 17th series of this thing or that thing or the other one. It's the one from the other publisher, not the original publisher. And every issue you've got, I think we talked about last week, 88.7% of all issues on the market, that are available for sale in 2024, were variants of one sort or another. And so nothing's ever just the issue number anymore. And you could find all this stuff, especially since we added all that photo reference to the new ComicBase Express free and Professional Plus editions, which we'd always had it in the archive edition. But since we add all the photo reference, yes, you could go to the entries on the whole things, scroll down until you see, oh yeah, it's that cover of issue number 5, or it's that cover of issue number 17. But you can save yourself just an enormous amount of time if you just use the magic decoder ring that's built into pretty much every comic book since about the summer of 1992. This little guy right there, the barcode. So let's look at a barcode for a moment and talk and I've done this before, so I'll be brief with this, but let's talk a little bit about what's in a barcode. So let me switch my mouse over to this, and hey, what the heck? Let's beep in a code here and see where it takes us. So, you might have questions. I have questions like, what the heck was that issue I was just looking at? Oh, it was Free Marvel Must-Haves March 2024 is its official actual title. Would I have gotten that just by looking at the damn book? Probably not. I again, with enough squinting at Dysia, maybe I could have, but no guarantees. Let me beep another one over here. And just the next one's on the stack. Whoops, sorry. Bounce out of there. By the way, watch where you're scanning. Don't beep this into the quantity field. If you want, let's just add it in here. So here's X-Men. X-Men 3rd series. Oh yes, and I love how this one's going to make a liar out of me by actually being, just issue number 3 and not 3A or 3C or whatever else. So it's yes, we said that 88.7% of these were variants of one sort or another. This one here is actually just the regular thing. All right, so let me go ahead and I'm just going to go to this issue here, X-Men 7th series, and I'll get to this one using a different technique. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go up to the part where you say find and beep in the barcode. All right, so there we go. Okay, all right, so I'm not that much of a liar. So there was a 3. There's also a 3A and a 3B and a 3C and a 3D, and oh my God, make it stop, right? All right, let me turn on the magnifier here so we can drill down to this a little bit more. Okay, great. All right, so this one is the official issue number 3, right? Which is why I have so darn many of them, apparently. I'm going to put myself in the show here. Okay, so this one is issue number 3. There is, as they say, a 3A, a 3B. You see the difference between the 3C and the 3A is the 3C is the virgin cover. It's the 1 in 100 rogue virgin cover because it doesn't have the X-Men logo on top of it. There's another completely different cover. And they apparently went back to town on this one, about 8 times in order to get all the different covers for X-Men 7th series number 3. I mean, this is a nothing comic book in the grand scheme of things. But anyway, one thing we want to do is we want to make it so I could at least enter the damn thing quickly. So let's look at X-Men 7th series number 3. And most importantly, let's stare down at this barcode here. All right. What does this barcode tell me? All right, so again, you guys have probably heard this beforehand, but for anyone new to the show, barcodes separated into 2 major blocks. The 7 59606, that just means Marvel Comics. That is the barcode that the International Universal Code Commission sold Marvel Comics way back in the day. I think they actually sell them by the year now, but prior to like 1993 or so, and we got in with ComicBase right under the limit. You could actually just pay them like $300, and you got a number to call your own, which was just, so there's a number, on all the ComicBase products, if you look at it, which is just whatever that 5 or 6 digit number is, that just means comic. That just means human computing. So 59606 just means Marvel Comics. 20920, which is the next set of digits up here, that means I guess X-Men 7th series. It's the 20,920th series they felt like designating for Marvel Comics, and it's and only Marvel knows that they in their own list that one meant X-Men 7th series. The thing we care is that all the subsequent issues of that one are also going to come out as 20920. All right, the 0 at the end here is just a check digit. You compute that using lots of combinations of math with the odd and the even digits and blah, blah, blah. And you can read about how that works on Wikipedia if you care. But this other part of the barcode down at the end here is the 00311. All right, that's actually 3 hunks of information, and it's done as 5 digits. The 003 means issue 3. Hey, great. That makes perfect sense. The 1 is variation number 1, and the other 1 is printing number 1. So now you know everything about EAN 13 barcodes, and that's the ones that are used on pretty much all the comic books in the world, and that's what that's all about. Now, you will also know that that was an enormous amount of work to go through to basically take me to X-Men 7th series. The way that we can do the magic we do is, like I say, there is very little like real information built into the barcode. I mean, if we had a big list of every publisher who'd ever gotten a barcode, we could have said, 59606, that's Marvel, of course, duh. And then if somehow Marvel had given us the list of the 20,922 series or whatever they had, we might have known that the one that they designated as 20922 was, X-Men 7th series. And from there, we could have gotten the 003, issue number 3. Yeah, okay, that's easy enough. Beyond that, issue number 1, generally the regular issue, but after that, they stick to A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or at least we do with our designations, until you run out of digits, at which point things get very fuzzy, and we basically, what people want to do is they wind up reusing the second digits, not really mean printing in variation. They mean it's just between those two, hopefully that tells us what the variation number is. And then from that point, it just becomes, you got to have somebody has to have been foolish enough to compile a vast database of every barcode used by every comic book on the whole planet. I mean, this is nuts. Who would go to all that trouble? I mean, it would take like 33 years to put this all. Oh yeah, that's what we did. So anyway, so what we've done over time, and we got interested in barcodes from back, before there were even, normally generalized barcodes, is we started just recording every barcode that had ever been used by every variation of every comic book that we'd ever seen, heard about, was ever advertised, published to us, and so forth. And it's all logged into the database. Matter of fact, we also track alternate barcodes and ISBN numbers and ISSN numbers and so forth. And we'll use all of this stuff to make it so that when you bleep in a barcode, it just automatically takes you straight to the right issue in ComicBase. So what we're doing here is, instead of you having to sit there and say, okay, yeah, I got this. This guy here, it looks like I'm holding up, it's an X-Men comic. I could stare at the indicia, I could type in X-Men, and I could start looking through the 300 or 400 titles that are X-Men something or other and try to figure out which one's which. Or I could just bleep the dang barcode and go directly to not just the right title, but the exact issue and variation that I want to be in. At which point the cursor is right in the field to set the quantity. You type a 1 on your keyboard and you're done. And the whole thing could not, I'd say it couldn't be faster, except we actually have ways to make it even faster than that, but it's pretty darn good. The goal we really want to have, so we actually have metrics, because I'm used to paying people to have to manage my comic books for me. The metric we're aiming for is that every comic book that comes through the office, we want you to spend 1 minute total on average to index it, label it, bag and board it, and file it. So if 100 comic books come in, on average, we expect to spend 100 minutes to have that comic book completely dealt with, as far as its physical thing, right? Now, obviously, we spend a lot more time with the comic book, doing things like scanning the cover, going through, finding all the creator indexes, and writing the storylines down, things like that. That's what our indexers are doing pretty much, a couple days of the week, right? When Diamond gets the shipments to us, we order like a mid-sized comic store, and we wade through all this stuff. We also process all of your submissions as far as additions to that kind of creator info. We get sent information on all sorts of crazy variants that we haven't seen, because we can't, even though we order one of everything, we can't order the 1 in 100 version of everything, because I'm not going to order 100 copies of X-Men, X-Men 7th series #3 in order to get the 1 in 100 Rogue X-Men cover. That is not going to happen, because not unless you guys want to pay like $10,000 each for your copies of ComicBase, and I don't think you do. So anyway, we have to rely on other people to send us some of this information from the crazy comic store that did order the 100 copies in order to get the Rogue one, and tell us what the barcode is so we can map that one in. But the nice thing is, when this is all done, it's really, really, really easy for you to enter your own books really, really fast. And it all starts with get yourself a barcode scanner. All right, so why am I banging on about get yourself an actual barcode scanner? One of these guys, and not using your phone. Again, this is kind of an old topic here, and by the way, here it's tethered here, but you can see that this is the actual long-awaited and wanted for version 3.0 of the iPhone application here. And yes, it does have a barcode scanner feature built into it, and it's great for a phone, and it sucks as a barcode scanner. There's no two ways around it. It's what is involved if I'm going to use a phone as a barcode scanner is I'm going to take this 30 megapixel scanner. I'm going to hold it above where the scanner is. I'm going to wait for it to kind of focus. I'm going to wait for my hand to stop shaking for a minute and for the camera to pull focus. It will sit there. It'll go bleep. It will then pull up the comic book I'm looking at and then say, okay, oh yeah, that's it. I'll scroll down and say, yeah, I've got it. It's in fine condition, or it's in near mint condition, and it's quantity 1. I'll hit save. And yes, you can do that. It works. It takes several times longer than if I'm just sitting there in ComicBase and going, hey, I want to add my week's comic books to the database, and I'm going to go to add by inventory, and I'm going to sit down there with all 20 comic books that came in in the stack from the shop, and I'm just going to go beep 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 save, and I'm done. So yeah, I mean, you want to use the phones are great for what they're good for. They're great for on the road. They're great for looking up things that you see at shows or stuff like that. And they are terrible for doing mass data entry. So don't try to make them do mass data entry, because you won't be happy. Well, I mean, you can be very patient and very cheap and save yourself the $99 or whatever it costs to get a proper barcode scanner. But your time, please value your own time. I mean, as a human being, value your own time enough to say, there's a better way, and I don't want to do it. So anyway, with that said, yeah, please get yourself an actual barcode scanner. And then a couple of real quick barcode tips I want to show you in the program. So let's flip over here. And this was actually kind of a funny one. So I inadvertently showed you a couple of these, including doing it one thing the wrong way. So if you sit there up there and you're right up at the top of the program here, and by the way, you can also get here very quickly if you don't want to use take your hands off the keyboard. If you hit Control J, it'll immediately put the cursor right back up here at the top where that find is. And what's looking for you to do at that point is type in a series name or a barcode. I could have typed X-Men and started saying X-Men 7th series and so forth. But instead, again, let me go to a different one just so you can see I'm actually doing something here. I'm just going to go and beep in a barcode, and here's Free Marvel Must-Haves, March 2024. Now, something very subtle just happened here. Where's the cursor? All right, the cursor's not there anymore. The cursor is right down here waiting for me to type a 1, so I can set the quantity equal to 1. So the thought is, if I'm bouncing around the database like this, what I probably want to do, if I just want to immediately go to a database, go someplace in the program, is I'm going to figure out where I'm going to, X-Men or whatever the thing is. I'm going to find the title. I'm going to go there. And then as soon as I go there, probably the thing I want to do is find the issue I'm interested in. But once I found the issue, the number one thing I'm most commonly going to want to do is say, hey, I've got it. Quantity is 1. Or I've got it, but the condition is in very fine. At which point I'm just going to click over here and say very fine, or whatever the thing is that I want to do. But the most common thing by far is that I'll want to just set the condition, and that's why the cursor, after you beep it from starting here, moves immediately down to the quantity field of the issue that you've done. So if you do the dumb thing, which I just did, like I say, I inadvertently demoed this, if you just immediately then beep another barcode in, you're going to put a stupidly large number into the quantity field, which ComicBase is largely smart enough to say, oh wait, you just entered like a 13 or 17 digit quantity. That's probably not what you meant, and it'll beep at you and say, yeah, it's probably not what you meant, and it'll revert it out. But no, it's if you want to go back from here, the quick way to go back and scan another one is to hit Control J, which will take you straight back here, or just click into the field and it'll go there. But if you have the Pro or Archive versions of ComicBase, a much better way to do all this in general, rather than beeping randomly around the program and doing it one by one, is use the, there's a command in the program called Add by Barcode. Right under here, Add by Barcode, or Control I, which pulls up something. It's a very similar in its idea to like a supermarket checkout terminal, where basically you can go and just take a bunch of books. And I'm just going to beep in a couple here. It's our, and as quickly as I can beep them in, it's going to look them up, add them in, and it's going to get ready to enter them to the program, just like this. And when I'm all done, and I've got all the ones I want, I can hit save, and it'll blast them in all at once. Now, it's funny, one of the things that came up when I was chatting with the gentleman yesterday is he's like, yeah, could you make it so that, like, the dialogue sticks around and I don't have to keep on hitting save after each one? I'm like, yeah, actually, it's once upon a time we used to call this thing the batch barcode menu, which in retrospect, maybe we lost something. I thought it was too techy of a term, so I lost the term batch. We used to have a whole batch menu in ComicBase back in ComicBase 2017. I lost that in the new one. It's just called Add by Barcode, but it actually might have lost a key clue to how it's meant to be used, with the idea of saying, yeah, no, you're meant to actually scan a bunch of things at once here and keep going until you're done. And at that point, you hit save, because that's how it's actually meant to be used. So that was something that, if you missed that one too, you're not alone. But if you did miss that one, you can really speed up your data entry by just doing all the books at once and then hitting save. Now, let me give you a couple other tips on this window while you're at it. First of all, big fan of a couple things. I always print title dividers for everything that comes through the shop. Here, everything is a new title for reasons I'll get to in a moment. So if there are any new titles that come up, so if this is the first copy of Free Marvel Must-Haves from March 2024 of that title, or if this is the first copy of X-Men 7 series that's in my database, it's going to immediately go from here to print a title divider for the new title, so I can slap it on a divider and be ready as I file that to have this thing nicely organized in my thing. I'm a big fan of this one. I would suggest you look into it as well. It can definitely save you a bunch of time. The other thing I'm a big fan of is clicking this Display Items After Saving checkbox. So if I do this one, and I'm going to do this right now, I'm just going to add these guys in. And depending on whether I've done this before, I may or may not see it go through the print dialog. No, it looks like, okay, so it looks like it's already added at least one item of these issues before. So you didn't see it pull up the print dialog to print the title dividers. But what you did see is it pulls up, here's a list of the items you just added. All right, so why do I care, right? The reason I care is because this allows me very quickly to do stuff with the things as a group of what I just added. So for instance, I could hit Control A here, which is select all, right? I also, could, if I don't want to use the shortcut, I could go under edit and say select all, but Control A, good. It's a good shortcut to learn for these things. And once I've got things selected all, one policy we've got in here is that everything, and I do mean everything, gets an ID label. So I'm immediately going to come down here and print ID labels for everything that I just added in. And let's go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and switch this one to, do I have the Dymo hooked up to this one? Yeah, let's say I do. All right, so I'm going to switch this one to Dymo address label, and I'm going to go ahead and preview this. So what it's going to do here, and it says, yeah, some of these things have multiple ones in stock. All right, what it's going to do here is it's going to print out a label that looks like this for every single item that I just added. Now, why do I want a label like this to stick on the whole thing? Because of that same problem we just had 2 seconds ago of knowing, all right, it says X-Men on it. It's number 3 of some sort. Maybe it's the A, maybe it's the B, maybe it's the G version. But just by taking a label, which cost me something like 1/3 of a cent to buy these labels in bulk, taking that label and in huge letters saying this is X-Men 7th series number 3. It turns out when we actually took our stopwatches out and timed our own people filing comics, that it shaved something like 20 minutes off the time to file 100 100 comic books. It was a very significant increase in the performance of the people doing the work. All right, why would that be? I mean, that's a counterintuitive result, because I mean, what we had here beforehand, before we insisted on this policy, is, and remember, you're talking about an office full of people who deal with comic books every day of their working lives, right? So beforehand, you had a copy of ComicBase would come in here. You'd be handling a book called X-Men. It says issue number 3 on it, right? So how hard could that one be to find? And what would happen to people is they would be filing comics along, and they'd kind of remember, yeah, we're on the 7th series now. Yeah, so it's issue number 3. I got it. And then something like free Marvel must-haves would come along, where it would make everything stop cold as they took it out of its bag and board that they just put it into, went down, tried to find the tiny indicia at the bottom, which says, oh yeah, this is really free Marvel must-haves April 2003, or whatever the hell the number was, for the whole thing. I mean, in that process of, they were filing along just great, and then about every 4th or 5th comic book, and again, these are experienced guys who all they do all day long is manage comic books. That process would add so much time to their workload that we found out that just if we say, look, everything that comes through the office gets a label, that wound up saving us, again, like 20 minutes off the time it was required to file 100 comic books on average. We tried several of our staffers with this one, and it was a pretty reproducible result. There were some staffers who were faster than others, but none of them didn't have a massive delta in their performance of labeled versus unlabeled. Now that's just to file them, right? That's to put them away the first time. To get them out again, night and day. So, I hope not to die with the biggest pile of comic books on the planet. It's some of you that might be your ideal. I would like to have a nice comic collection, but I don't need to have the most. So as a result, most of the things that come through our offices are for sale. So we use them to feed the database. And if I don't personally love them, if they're not marked as reserved and they become part of my personal collection so that they're not for sale, then they typically go out the other end where they become part of our Atomic Avenue store. So if you go to atomicavenue.com/store/pbickford, you will see everything that we've got. There's like 56,000 things that you can buy off of our Atomic Avenue store. And yes, they are priced at the price they are listed in ComicBase. But anyway, so we, at the end of the day, I want this not to be the very last time I see Marvel must-haves from April 2023 or whatever it was. I want to pull this again because someone ordered it. I want to be able to very, very quickly find that one in the pile, stick it in an envelope, and ship it to them because they just paid me money for it. And the difference in time required to retrieve a labeled comic book versus an unlabeled comic book, it's immeasurable. I can't even put a number to it because it's so much faster. Particularly if you do one simple thing when you place the ID labels on the whole thing, is so the actual title for the comic book might be pretty much anywhere on the cover, or it might not be on the cover at all. It might be hidden in the indicia. Or the cover title might be completely different than what the actual name is. What we do is that divider label goes front center right here. And it's always top center on every comic book that goes into a bag and board. Why is it there? Because this means that once we've located the title in our boxes, we can literally let our fingers do the walking. And as soon as we see, and number 3, it goes just like there, and we're not doing anything other than looking at the merest top of the comic book. We're not having to dig for it, stare at issue numbers, not doing any of that nonsense. It's right there front and center. We can grab it and pull orders very, very quickly, and that makes the whole thing work. So yeah, very, very much suggest do that. And by the way, I've just now combined about 2 of my tips here. The first thing I said is, actually, I've combined 3 of them. This is very bad public speaking on my part here, because typically I will talk, I have, if you can see my show notes, it says, point number one, get a barcode scanner. Point number two is use batch entry, right? And point three was use labels the right way. And I've actually just gone through all three of those. So count this one, if you're keeping score at home, as three of our top tips. But let me see if I can give you some other sub tips along this one that were relevant and that I actually bothered to put in my show notes as I glossed through three areas all at once. This terrible instructional material for me. But anyway, we're doing what we can. All right, so a couple of things about the barcode scanner that I want to say. First of all, we also timed data entry in general. So if you just went through ComicBase, you kind of know where you are, and you want to enter the books versus you want to enter them with a barcode scanner, it wound up being something like 3.8 times on average faster to use the barcode scanner than to use any other form of entry in the program. So particularly if you can say add by batch and you're entering books that way, absolutely. That is the win. If your time means anything to you, get yourself a scanner. I hope you're getting the message on that one. All right. What about books that do not have barcodes? So prior to the summer of 1992, a lot of books either had no barcodes or they had barcodes that were kind of there and not there. Prior to summer 1992, it was typical if you did have barcodes on comics, and even that only came along a few years earlier, that the barcode would be a very incomplete barcode. It would basically, instead of having 5 digits at the end to tell you the issue, variation, and printing, it would have 2 digits, and the 2 digits were typically there to tell you the cover date or the month of publication. So if it was March for the cover date, it would be 03 would be the thing. If it was April, it would be 04 and so forth. But that also meant that if you went through typical titles of the time, that every issue published 12 months apart from each other had the same barcode because it was by the same publisher, say Marvel Comics. It would be the same title, say Captain America, and they were just reusing those two. So if you enter a comic like that into ComicBase, it'll make a little boop sound at you, which, by the way, is another hint here, is keep your volume up when you're doing your data entry, because when you've got your heads down and you're beeping books as fast as you can, you need something that you're not looking at that can get your attention if something's going wrong. So keep your volume on. I know some people really like to work in complete quiet. I get it. But this is one where you need that alternate path, because if you just keep blindly scanning, I guarantee you will occasionally get into some kind of weird state, like, oh yeah, it's trying to tell you that there were 3 different issues of Captain America that all have the same barcode. Which one did you mean? It'll be telling you something like that, and you'll scan like 4 other comic books before you even glance up at the screen to see what's going on. So yeah, leave the volume up is another tip. So anyway, but we will actually, if that does happen, if there are multiple items that have the same barcode, and this happens also when you see people having just stupid numbers of variants for the same issue. Like, say, there are issues of Vampirella that come out with like 30 variants for every issue. So some of those will have the same barcodes as each other, or at least they could. We will actually tell you, well, is it this one, or is it that one, or is it that one? We'll show you pictures of each of them, and you can kind of help pick which one you're really looking at there. But it doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's disruptive, but we at least get you through it. All right, what else is interesting? A question came up. What kind of barcode scanner do I need? So look, we do sell barcode scanners at ComicBase. We've done a lot in the last several years, especially, to really drive the cost of these down. So basically get you a really bulletproof barcode scanner that isn't going to break the bank. So I think even if I wasn't associated with ComicBase, I would wholeheartedly recommend the ComicBase barcode scanner as the one you probably want to look at first as a way of getting your books entered efficiently. But if, let's say, you just know, I don't know, I want to go my own way, I want to save a couple bucks, whatever the reason deal is, we play fair on this one. We don't have anything special in the program that locks it down to only work with the ComicBase barcode scanner. Basically, any barcode scanner you can find that faithfully reads all the human readable digits on the barcode, and I do mean all. It's especially got to get those last 5. But if it will read all those and it won't add anything extra, it will work with the program. So if you can find one yourself that will reliably do that, by all means, go ahead and do that. If you've got a barcode scanner sitting around from the shop and you want to reuse that yourself, absolutely. It will likely work, provided it does that. If you have trouble finding one that does that, typically where barcode scanners go wrong, and I know this because we had to test dozens, and I mean dozens and dozens. I keep on cleaning up the office and finding old barcode samples that we sourced off of different manufacturers that failed testing after we had to buy the sample. And so they would get chucked in the back of boxes and shoved in the back of storage closets. And whenever we clean things up over holidays, I'm like, oh, look, another 3 barcode scanners from that other vendor that we rejected. Anyway, when they do fail, this happens very frequently. We tested a lot of barcode scanners before we found one that qualified. Typically what they'll do is they will not get all the digits reliable, or they won't get them all the time. So the barcode scanner that comic books use is called EAN13 because it's the extended something. Someone had it in the chat beforehand, but the 13 is for the number of digits in the main code. The supplemental is that smaller batch of numbers at the end there. That's what the smaller group of digits called the supplemental. So typically it's a +5 supplemental that goes with the EN13. Unfortunately, or for our purposes, the barcode is considered valid by the barcode standards organizations, whether it's got a supplemental or not. So, because a lot of things that are EN13, like if I have a can of soup, it does not need to have a supplemental to tell me more. But if I have a latest issue of Time magazine, I do need that supplemental because there are going to be so many copies of Time magazine over time, and if I want to distinguish them at all, I've got to have more information than I can do with just those 13 digits. But unfortunately, the barcode standard for EN13 says, if you see a supplemental, great. If you don't see it, great too. Not great for us. So what happens is barcode scanners, they're just kind of like rando barcode scanners. Typically, we'll get the supplemental some of the time. And a lot of times they won't get the supplemental, and it'll make you crazy because without that supplemental, it's effectively a misscan, but you won't know it until you look up and you realize the barcode scanner was not recognized. And then sometimes you try it 5 more times and it gets it once, and you're like, oh yeah, I got it. Anyway, our standard when we're doing testing is it had to be able to pull the supplemental like 95% of the time on the first try, which is why I have so many boxes full of old scanners that I keep throwing out at Christmas time. Not that I'm sharing any news from around the office here. Anyway, but yes, that's the whole thing. But yeah, so Gatorsoul barcode scanner, we sell a wired and a wireless one. This is the wired one right here. It comes with a stand, so you can actually just wave the comic books under it if you want, or you can pick it up and grab it and scan it. This one inconveniently is attached to the PC that I'm demoing with. This is the one that's attached to my real PC that I do my own collection with. So yeah, I sprung for 2. But anyway, as you can tell, these are also the ones we would use at trade shows to demo. But anyway, whether you use the wired or the wireless, it's purely a matter of personal, of what you prefer. I used to, on my old desk, I used to really like the wired one with the stand and just take the comic book and wave it under the scanner like that. I don't do it anymore, but it has more to do with my desk layout than anything else. I like anything that controls the amount of clutter on my desk for the most part. These days, I gotta say, I go for the wireless one purely because it runs several months on a charge. You just charge it by plugging in the USB cable that comes with it. But it's just one less thing for me to hook onto different mic stands and knock over my Coke can with and do all the other crazy things that I do in my office, which I tend to do all the time with anything that has a cord. So that's my 2 cents on that. Someone put in the chat there, it's the EAN stands for the European Article Number. All right, thank you, chat. All right, let me see what else is going on that I want to say about barcodes. That was all I'll say about that. So let me go back to the chat here, because the chat has been awfully active as I've been yapping on about this. So let me scroll up here and see what I've just missed. Wow, that's a lot of talk. Okay, so all right, so a lot of love for the wireless scanner. That's excellent. Okay, let's see here. And apparently I said something funny somewhere. Okay, or someone said something funny. Okay, moving on. A joke happened that I don't entirely immediately get. Let's see here. Department kind of says, I'm digging the wireless scanner as well. Just wish there was a spot to hold the dongle when not in use, like the Logitech trackballs. Oh, that is a cool feature. I'm going to bounce off to somebody else's product here for a minute. So, all right, so I'm using a Logitech mouse. Fabulous mice, cost me maybe $30, right? I have a bunch of them. I keep one in my wireless, travel bag. I've got one down at different workstations I work on and so forth. And it runs, I don't know, probably years on a single AA battery. It's just fantastic. It basically just gets rid of a cable on my desk, and that is wonderful. But all these things work with a little tiny USB. They call it a dongle, but it's about like a little 1-inch plug. It's barely bigger than the USB port itself, but it plugs into a spare USB port in your computer, and it handles the wireless communication between this guy and your computer. And what Logitech does, and a lot of people who have these mice don't even know. So I'm sorry, I can take that back. It's one AA battery, it's 2 AA batteries that gets the years of life out of. But there's a little port. If you open up the back here by where the battery is, that little port right in the back there is a storage case for your dongle. So when you're taking this on the road with you, if you actually pull it out of your one computer and put it back in your mouse, and then close the case up on the whole thing, it's ready to go. It won't get lost when you travel and so forth. And it's a delightful design. And I don't know anyone else other than Logitech who ever thought to do it. But if you have a Logitech mouse and you haven't known that there was a secret compartment in the back by the battery case, now you do. So anyway, you're giving them some props on that one. All right, let's see here. Dr. B joins us from Cali. Excellent. Department kind of says, hate to be a whiner, because ComicBase does not always follow the industry. True, but generally we have a very good reason when we're not. We can get into title naming another day, because that's a 20-minute rant just by itself. All right, let's see here. Stephen Des. Okay, and then lots of things about title naming. Okay, and including discussions on the forums about title naming. All right, moving on. Ed asked, when was the new phone app launch? As soon as I can get this past the Apple Store. So anyway, if you want to come over to my house right now, I can install it on your phone right now, but everything else I got to get the Apple guys to give it up there. But we're looking pretty good on that one. It's been a long road, but anyway, hopefully we get that one squared away pretty quickly. All right, let's see here. Morris talking about the app. One feature of add by barcode is if you add mixed types. Okay, yeah, this is a fine point, but it's worth mentioning. So when you're using add by barcode, all right, so you could, as you're going in here, there's nothing about add by barcode that stops you from entering, a bunch of comic books, followed by a book, followed by, a magazine, followed by, another bunch of comic books, etc. And if you say display issues after saving, so if as you add them, it's going to add them all. It's going to do exactly what the thing says. But when you say display issues after saving, there's a limit to the list that it's going to be this list right here, in that this list, it's kind of got to choose one as far as what it is you're doing. In other words, so if you are entered a bunch of comic books and you want to display what you've done, but you also had a couple books in there, it's going to pick. I think the first one you entered is going to tell you what type of list it's going to show you back. So if the very first thing you scanned was a book and then you entered 20 comic books, it's going to show you the book. Because books have different fields than comic books do, and we can't just mix and match the fields in one big grid. But one thing you can do, if it wasn't able to show you all the different types you want, is you can actually go to the history over here, and you can look at the added items. If you scroll back to that in your history, if there were multiple items that was there and it wasn't able to display them, it'll say, well, I showed you the books last time. Did you want me to show you? And then you can choose the type of items that were also part of that batch that you weren't able to see before. So you can go back and look at the comics, go back and look at the magazines, go back and do the rest and so forth. That is kind of an obscure feature. It's kind of an obscure limitation, but it's worth knowing about, because I understand why the limitation is there in the grid, because again, all the different collectibles, being different collectibles, have different things they can show you about, and it's hard. You can't really show them all in one big thing. But anyway, but if you do need to kind of go back and page between them, yeah, use the history function for that one. It's a really slick way to do it. All right, let me see. Okay, I think did I hit most of the chat on here? Ask me printing multiple labels if you had multiple issues. Someone else pointed out that the ComicBase scanner also works on USPS tracking numbers. Yeah, it's this thing is also great when you're shipping comic books. So like when I print a label after we're shipping it, I just, it says what's the track number, I just beep in, the scanner and so forth. One thing that's kind of cool about these guys is all the new scanners they're called two-dimensional barcode scanners, which is not. This is actually a three-dimensional object, but the code itself that it's reading, really old school barcodes, the kind you see on, say, UPC codes and things like that. They're called one-dimensional scanners because the only thing that matters as far as the scanner is concerned is the space in between the lines. It doesn't care how tall the lines are. It doesn't care about anything else. It cares about the space in between. That's how it gets the characters out of it. Now, more modern codes, and this is a couple generations later in terms of barcode technology, we have two-dimensional barcodes, which the most famous of which is the QR codes you see on places, where you can actually encode just stupid amounts of information on those barcodes, and you can actually tell kind of how much information is in the barcode by how many pixels is the code comprised of. If it's like 5 big chunks, well, you know that it's got nothing more than like a zip code in there. If it's got like tons of little dots everywhere in the whole thing, then it's probably encoding a ton of information. At the very least, something like a website URL. Sometimes if you look at like the barcode, and this thing will also scan those, if you scan the back of your own driver's license, just open up Notepad or something like that and scan the back of your driver's license, you will realize that the back of your driver's license has basically your whole life on it. Or at the very least, who you are, where you live, how tall you are, your eye color, all that stuff is encoded on the back of that thing. But yeah, no, it's at some point when you're bored, pick up all the ID cards in your life, your Costco card, whatever else, open up Notepad and scan the various codes on them, because they'll all typically be auto recognized by the scanner, and you can see all the things that they're actually tracking. It's actually kind of fascinating. Okay, moving on. And we have the obligatory messages, because I've really been going on about the whole thing. Please, the PSAs are, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe, which again, absolute YouTuber malpractice. Please stop everything you're doing. Put down the sandwich. Hang up on your mother. Whatever the heck the thing is you're doing right now, and is clearly your number one job as a YouTube person out there is to hit the like and subscribe button, because that's what we all live for. But anyway, please do that. Also, don't forget that we have the ComicBase message boards over at forums.comicbase.com, and there are also threads for ComicBase discussions on there, as well as links to Andre's world famous comic catalog. Please do that. Hope Andre's in the chat here someplace. Kind of wonder where the next version is coming in. But yeah, it's been a while. But anyway, yeah, looking forward to that. All right, that is the PSAs. Let's get back to the show, I think, here. Seems like Pete had a Red Bull before the show. No, it's Sunkissed, because the store was out of Diet Orange Crush. All right, so I talked about labels. So batch entry, I talked about not having to hit save. I said keep the sound up. We go with that. One thing, if you are sitting down there with, sometimes I'll do this. So when we are getting books in, typically I've found that when we're processing new comic books, just random stuff, and your mileage may vary on this one, but this is what we found just for doing lots and lots of comic books. The sweet spot for us is entering about 30 comic books or less at a time. So, I mean, if I've got just piles and piles and piles of comic books that have not, been sorted or seen the light of day or things like that, there's nothing logically stopping me from entering 200 of them into that box all at once. But the sweet spot tends to be around 30 for a couple reasons. One, if they're new titles, there's a pretty good chance I'm going to want to stop and print title of Iris for them. And being able to slot in 7 new titles into a stack of 30 takes very little time. Having to slot in 25 new titles into a stack of 60 comic books or 70 comic books takes significantly, like it's literally an exponentially longer time to find the appropriate ones, because it's all about search functions and things like that. But every time you have to go through a search, how long your list is, you're going to be searching through an average of half of that in order to find the thing. Lather, rinse, repeat. Searching through half of 7 is 3 items. Searching through half of 24 is 12 items. one is 4 times longer than the other. So anyway, so yeah, you want to be able to keep the stacks kind of manageable. The other thing that happens, and this again, it happens in all of our lives, is just dumb crap happens with your computer stuff. Like for me, my label printer will occasionally decide, no, I don't feel like feeding that label. I feel like having the entire roll wrap upon itself, causing Pete to stop everything and fish labels out and go digging at it with a toothpick or tweezers and everything to unstick it. That happens, I don't know, every 700th label, whatever the thing is. But when it does, it really hoses me up. I would much rather have that hose me up in a run where I was trying to print 30 labels rather than when I was trying to print 300 labels. So yeah, things happen. So I'd say keep the batches to a reasonable number. It doesn't really pay to go much bigger than, certainly I wouldn't go bigger than 50, but 30 in my estimation is kind of like the maximal squeeze spot as far as how many to do at once. All right, let's see what else is going on. Oh, Dymo versus laser is a question that comes up on labeling. So I already talked about why ID labels save time. Dymo versus label. So I just talked about, so Dymo is a type of label that uses heat to print onto what, they come on rolls and the labels all look like just white. And even though the label printer itself has no ink cartridge in it, what it has is it has the ability to focus heat very specifically, and to use heat to raise black on the label itself. The labels are thermoreactive. So as a result, what you do is you get equivalent of like 150, 200 DPI. They say 300, but it's not really 300 resolution out of these labels. But it does a perfectly serviceable job of printing the labels. We in the office tend to use Dymo labels. We used to use sheet-fed Avery labels. We don't anymore. There's some good and some bad. So the reason we do it these days is because we have a lot of, look, I just need to do a couple things, print a couple labels, move on, or I don't want to be running over to the printer because it's all the way, like you can see it there. It's like, I don't know, like 4 feet away. I don't have enough time in my day to go and run over to the printer every minute to swap label paper in and out and count. Let's see, I was just printing on the 17th position of a 30-row sheet. So let's see, I got to start on position 18 as I go forward. Who's got time for that? In our busy lifestyles, we got to move on. So what I do is under my desk is I have a couple of Dymo label printers that actually it's set up so that when one runs out, it automatically switches to the other. It's called a thing called the twin turbo. But basically, they're just always loaded up with labels. And when I blitz through and I get sent, the guys over in California just sent me another 150 comics to enter and file in. I blitz through them. If one of them ever runs out, I reload the whole thing. But I'm never having to run around and change media, and that is worth a lot to me. It saves a lot of time. That being said, the downsides, Avery labels, they are slightly, and I do mean slightly more expensive. We get them for about 0.3 cents each in bulk. Don't buy them from Dymo, buy them from like Label City or anybody else, which also means, because the very latest Dymo labels, they started doing the Keurig cup thing where they're trying to more or less lock themselves down so that they will only run on official Dymo media because they want to make that sweet money as well as the money for selling you the printer. So I'm going to say, if you buy a Dymo printer, pretty much I would, talking as a buddy, is not as opposed to a corporate spokesman, as a buddy, I would tell you, do not buy the very latest model of Dymo printer. So in other words, don't buy their 550 line of printers, buy the 450 line. It does all the same things, but it's not locked down to Dymo only media. And that will save you a fortune over the lifetime of using the product. I feel strongly enough about this one that when one of my printers gave out a year or two ago, I didn't go to Dymo and buy a new printer. I went to eBay and bought an old printer because there's no way I was going to go and say I'm going to swap off my media and go buy Dymo only media, which is no better, but which costs 6 times more. It's ridiculous. So don't do it. All right, so that's one downside of Dymo. It's not a major one because in quantity, the label cost winds up being about the same as buying Avery labels on sheets in bulk. The thing that is A worse problem for long-term storage is that Dymo labels over a number of years, and we're talking years here, will slowly fade. They are heat reactive and they're also light reactive. And so if you leave them out and where they can get hot and or exposed to a lot of light, or frankly, just very, very, very old, they kind of fade away. Think about an old supermarket receipt. It's the same kind of deal, is that it looks razor sharp for the first 6 months and then not so much. Now, Dymo labels will hang in for years, but they won't hang in for decades. So sometimes I will sit there and be going through books, the things I labeled in the 1990s, and I can barely read them. I certainly can't read the fine print, at which point I consider having to slap a new label on it. I would not, and I do not have to do that for the ones that we labeled many, many years ago using laser labels. Those things are just as sharp as the day we printed them, 20, 30 years long. So if you think that that will apply to you, something worth considering. But like I say, it comes at a fair amount of inconvenience in terms of loading media and counting which position you're coming from and stuff like that. So put those two in mind with each other when you decide which way to go. Whatever you do, on the other hand, very, very huge fan of label stuff. It's just a huge time saving, even though it involves some extra time to slap the label on the thing. So anyway, that's the thing. All right. Let's see. I talked about Dymo versus label. Shortcuts for label printing to do a couple of stuff very quickly. So we talked about this one. So when I want to print labels, you can go straight to the menus and say print and then choose identification labels and do stuff like that. One thing that's often helpful, though, is instead of going that way to specify what you want to print labels for, a lot of times it's easier to be looking at the thing that you want to print labels for. And this is a really good example of that one. This is one where, like, for instance, I added a bunch of comic books with add by barcode, and now I'm already looking at the things I want to label. And all I'm doing is I say, okay, select them all, which I can either highlight like this or I can hit Control A. And then with them selected, I'm going to right click and I'm going to say print identification labels, or I could have just not even right clicked. I could have just hit F6, which, if I'm really clever here, I can zoom in so you can actually read that. So right click and we can do that. There we are. F6 is the printing identification labels. So I typically, when I'm doing it myself, my move is beep a bunch of books in, hit save, Control A to select them all, hit F6 to print ID labels. It takes me straight here. Now you'll notice what that did is it did the exact same thing it would have done if I'd just gone from here and said print ID labels and then selected the two items. Now, the reason I did it the other way is because I've just been scanning them. I'm already looking at the list of the things I want. For me to go and reverse it to say, well, I want to print ID labels. What do I want to print ID labels for? And then go running around in the program choosing between different titles in order to find the ones would be significantly longer. There's kind of a little bit of a noun verb kind of thing going on where you either, in ComicBase with printing, you can either say be looking at the thing, be looking at the noun, the object, and then say, what do you want to do with it? Do I want to print a report on it? Do I want to print a label for it? Do I want to quick change it? Do I want to, so you kind of, and that's typically the sort of thing you would right click on the thing and then choose the verb, right? Or you also can say, all right, what do you want to print? So that's, you're choosing the verb first, and then it says, well, so what's the object? What's the noun? And then at that point, you would say, select the title, select the issue, so forth. Use whichever one makes the most sense for whatever you're doing at the time. For printing labels in general, I find it's easier just to be looking at the thing I want to print the label for, and then go and do the verb, right click and hit the label. So say in this particular case, for printing, ID labels, it looks like, add them in, select them, right click, or just hit F6, print the ID labels, and I'm done. A couple other places where you can do quick shot label type things like this is, I don't know if you guys knew this one, but for instance, if I'm looking at a particular title, like let's say I haven't printed a title divider for Free Marvel Must-Haves March 2024, I can actually right click on the name itself right here. And there's a bunch of stuff I can do just from that title. I could look it up on Atomic Avenue. I could see what, who's got ones for sale. I could Google it and see, what interesting information can I find on it. I can search the Grand Comics database for it. And most importantly for me, I can print a divider label for it right here. So if I'm looking at any given title, right click on it, print a divided lib, or I could print item checklists or price lists or run a quick report, whatever. There's lots of cool things like that. But yeah, don't forget about the right-click menu. Is when you're looking at a thing and you want to say, well, what can I do about it? A lot of times right-click will give you the verbs that you can use upon that thing, and it'll save you some hunting around. So, all right, I think that concludes all the other stuff I want to say about that. It does. Thank goodness. All right, so that was only 3 tips if we're keeping score, at least officially. All right, I'm actually going to push on a little bit forward here because dang it, I promised you 5 tips. So let's get to the rest of them. All right, the other one: bag and board ahead of time. All right. What the heck is Bickford talking about here? All right, so I'm sorry, and this is the one where I'm thinking, can I make the reach way over to where the bags and boards are? And the answer is not without disconnecting my headphones, and I care about your time too much for that. All right, so comics need bags. Just like humans need love, comics need bags. Before there were bags, there were lots of destroyed comic books. Once there were bags, the next way we would destroy comic books is we would wind up bending them up and stretching their spines at things, but at least we wouldn't be bending their covers to crap for the most part. So the thing the bag needs is it needs a board. There are people who just bag their comic books. To me, when comic books run an average of $5 each and comic boards run about a nickel, I'm going to say that is the original penny wise, pound foolish. Don't do it, guys. Bag and board everything. Now, use a decent board. The nice white ones that are glossy on one side and and are acid free and all that stuff. That's the kind of thing that you can buy in bulk lots for basically 5 cents, 5 to 7 cents with shipping per board. They are the best thing you can do for your comic books. Every comic needs a bag and a board. But wait, that sets me back 10 cents. Yes, do it. Suck it up. Just do it. Anyway, you're going to do it to protect your comic books, because once it's bagged and boarded, then there's a very limited amount of bad stuff that can happen to your comic book. Outside of that bag and board, comics are some of the most fragile dang things anyone has ever set out to collect, and they're not going to have a good life if you leave them too long without a bag and board on them. All right. With the bags and board, though, there's a process. And again, I'm all about just minimizing the amount of garbage time I have to deal with in my collection. And so when I'm sitting there and I'm doing 30, 40, 50 comic books at once, and I got to bag and board them, so here's the list. I got to scan them into my database. I got to bag and board them. If I'm using self-adhesives, I got to throw away the little piece of plastic that, was mapping off the adhesive, and somehow make sure that thing actually winds up in the garbage can, doesn't mysteriously levitate out of it, which they always like doing. You guys know what I'm talking about. I'm going to need to slap a label on them. I'm going to need to stick title dividers on them, and I need to file them away. And once I've done that, then I'm done with the unfun part of those comic books. Now, hopefully at some point I've got a chance to read them, but as far as everything else, they're logged into my collection. And again, if we're hunting for perfection here, we're looking for 1 minute or under as a sustained time for all of that. So the reason that I want to do my bagging and boarding ahead of time, there's 2 reasons for it. One of them is kind of like, okay, it makes sense. And the other one is counterintuitive. So the one that makes sense is this. All right, if I'm dealing with a bunch of comic books, typically I've got like 30 of them sitting on my desk at once. I've got a bunch of things in my hands all the time. I'm trying to grab a bag, trying to grab a board. I'm trying to slap the thing, the board underneath the bag. I'm trying to stick them, to put the board, the board and the comic book into the bag at the same time. I got to rip the little thing off there. I got to seal the whole thing closed. And I got to, stick a label on. I got to put it down, right? It's a lot of manual operations. It's a lot of hands flying everywhere to keep it all done, and a lot of Coke cans that hopefully I'm not knocking into the floor during the process. So one thing is, if you just measure how much time it takes to do this one, you don't think about it, but it is like a second or two. It's not like more than that, but it's like a second or two faster to take the comic book and slap it into a bag and board that have already been assembled to each other, to slide that in there. That is to get the board put under there, arrange the whole thing in, stick it into the bag, and do that kind of thing, and then throw it in. So you save like 1 or 2 actual legit seconds. This is not a compelling reason to change up your workflow, though. The compelling reason to change up your workflow is twofold. One is it allows there to be less overall mistakes in the process, because there's less operations in the process. I mean, if you actually see where comic books have to move from place to place, and where your hand has to be in order to get all the pieces together, you've taken like 2 or 3 physical operations out of that whole process if you're just taking comic goes into bagboard. It simplifies the whole thing. And if you just kind of count your work session and say, okay, because I get to be a stickler about this sort of thing. I'm just like, well, how efficiently did I do this? Because again, I hate this work, so I want to do it as efficiently as possible. If my first choice of having someone else do it for me is not on the table. But if I have to do it, I find out that I just make less mistakes on everything. If I've taken down the number of operations, I will have less labeling mistakes. I will have less taping mistakes. I will have less, filing mistakes. It all goes down if I can just take down the number of operations, period, because it's somewhere along the line. It's straining my mental load. The other thing it lets me do is it lets me turn my brain off entirely during part of them, because I can do the bagging and boarding just entirely ahead of time. I can sit down there, face over and listen to a podcast, watch a movie, whatever else, with 200-300 bags and boards, and just robotically stuff them into each other and put them into a stack for later use. And I can do that without the use of my mind whatsoever, while I'm doing something much more enjoyable. So even though it does save me, in effect, really a couple seconds to do this, as opposed to doing it all as one big part of one big operation, I think probably the thing that I find the most interesting, at least for myself, is that it lets me do part of it when I'm just kind of mentally asleep, because then the times when I got to be mentally awake and on the ball, those are faster and they're more efficient, and that's the time I really mind losing. So that would be my advice on bagging and boarding. Okay, and I think we've done that. So last thing I've got to say about everything. So it says Department of Comments. Sorry, there's some interesting chat going on here. Department of Comments says, yes, the Dymo label faded. Yes, absolutely. No argument about that at all. Okay. Okay, let's see here. Well, lots of things. All right. Some PDF files, don't understand that one. Okay. Department of Comics says uses about 90 a clip. If you can make it happen, man. He says I use the inkjet printer because the label won't disappear after time in the heat. Absolutely. I mean, that is, I'll admit, that is the trade-off that we generally make on these things. If I was labeling these things for eternity, I would probably make a different decision than we do here, because the majority of comic books that I label, I don't necessarily want to see in 10 years. If they were sold and out of my life in 10 years, I'd probably be a generally happier guy. Now, that's not everything. I mean, it's like, they're the comic books I love, and you'll know I love them because they're not for sale. Those are the ones that typically I will label for eternity. But yeah, in general, I'm happy to move them out as they go. So the fact that Dymo labels will fade after a decade or several years or so isn't generally a deal breaker for me. But yeah, if there was a way to keep them from doing that would be better. All right, let's see here. Department of Comics says, I get my new books from DCBS and I pay them 25 cents each to bag and board them for me. Well, okay, well, Mr. Rockefeller over there. So my wife and I assemble the bags and boards while we watch TV. Okay, cool. I have not been able to find anyone I can pay to bag and board other than just standard employees for the whole thing. I used to pay my kids. It's like one of your first jobs when you grow up in the business for doing ComicBase. Is like, hey kids, well, you want to earn some money? Here you go. Here's a whole bunch of bags, a whole bunch of boards. It's like a job. It's hard to mess up, and we teach them responsibility and stuff like that. So we'll take it from there. All right, and okay, and Ian Becca Comics, welcome to the show. All right, so all right, last thing I would say here. Number 5, and again, I'm a bit of a broken record on this one, but file alphabetically if you possibly can. What I mean by that is when you're getting your comic books there and you've got them, they're bagged, they're boarded, they're labeled, they've been entered in the program, it's time to put them away. If you can possibly make it happen, don't do the easiest thing, which is to say, dump them in the first available box and hope for the best. It's one of those things where, just as a life philosophy, I guess I got it coming down to this one, is try to do the things today that future you won't hate you for. So, I mean, be the past you that you want to be. So it's like, and honestly, past me dumping comic books into the first available box makes past me very, very happy in that moment, and it makes future me hate him, because A comic box holds an average of 200 comic books. If I know nothing else about these ones, even if they've got lovely labels right at the top, like we said, if the very only thing I did is I stuck all my comic books in there to the first available box, it means I'm going to look through an average of 100 comic books in order to find any particular comic book in that box. And if I don't find it, I will have no confidence whatsoever it wasn't there, because I literally have to research the whole count at once. If you possibly can make it work in your situation, put your comics in alphabetical order. In other words, make their physical structure of how you store them tell you where they ought to be, and coincide with how, the information of the comic book itself. What the heck do I mean by that? Is I want X-Men 7th series to be filed under X, somewhere after X-Men 6th series and somewhere before X-Men 8th series, which is going to happen any minute now. And if I don't find it there, I will instantly know, well, I guess I don't have it, because if it was there, it would have been in the X-Men 6th series position. Moreover than that, I would like issue 3 to be right after issue 2, which is right after issue number 1. So that way, when I open up a box with 200 items in it, literally by looking down it, especially if I put title dividers in so I can quickly glance down titles, I'm only going to add touch, so literally look at or literally touch, but I'm only going to have to access an average of, it turns out, 7 different points in that box in order to find any particular comic in that box. It's the log of how many items in there, because I can always do what's essentially called a binary search between the 2 points. So if I know that the X box is before the Y box, it's after the it's after the V box, the W box. I know exactly where that box is going to be within that box, especially if all I got to do is glance down title dividers. I know where the series is going to be. And then within that series, which is the area between 2 title dividers, which, let's face it, these days is no longer this much. It's now this much, right? At that point, I'm going to touch an average of 1 or 2 items before I found exactly the issue I want, because, if it's, higher than the first thing, I divide the space that's left in half, or in order to get to the midpoint, or I can kind of guesstimate and so forth. But you can always be going halfway in between your previous 2 points, and you'll very, very quickly find the one you want. Future you, which is the one who has to pull this stuff out again, is going to love you if you've organized your comic books this way. Future you will hate you if you just dump them in the first available comic box. Now, if your plan, and this is a legitimate plan, if this is your plan, I would just say admit it to yourself. Be strong in your decision. But if your plan is to stick them on there, I'm never selling my comic books, I'm never going back to them, I'm never going to reread them, and my future, inheritors can worry about organizing my collection. If you just want to live for today, hey man, seize the moment, I guess, at which point grab the first available box and dump them in, and God help you. It's like, you will have a lovely time. It is definitely faster to file comic books if you don't try to put them in order. But putting them in order pays off literally on an exponential scale versus putting them not in order. The other thing that's nice is if you put them into alphabetical order, so that the actual name of the comic book will tell you where it will be stored, is you don't need to worry about things like box numbers. So a lot of people ask us for, hey, why don't you have a box number field in ComicBase? And the answer is, well, we got custom fields. You can make one of those your box number if you want. But, let's face it, all these years, we could have had a dedicated box number field in ComicBase. It wouldn't have cost us too much to put it in there, right? Why didn't we? Because it's a terrible way to organize comics. It's the reason it's terrible is because, again, it makes filing them initially really, really easy, and it makes retrieving them hellish. Because even if you know the box number, even if you never reorganized your boxes, and you always remembered to change your box numbers when you move things between one and the other, and all the other things that aren't actually going to be true. But even if you did all that, it still means on average you're going to look through 100 items in order to find one item, and that's a terrible trade-off. It's a terrible use of your time. Yes, you can do it if you absolutely insist on. The ComicBase will support that. You can just quick change, say box number is 3, choose custom field number 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever else you want to be box number, and as soon as you add a whole bunch of comic books, if your plan after you add them all in is to put them all in box 37, Control A, quick change, set box number 37, boom, I guess you're done. You put them in there. Future you is gonna hate you for this. Anyway, with that said, all right, guys, that's about it. Thank you so much. The Barb guy says I tried alphabetical once, just once. Um, yeah, it's a point where I alphabetize the box. So the box is not the whole series. The box may have a bunch of different titles. You know, to the extent, so the downside of putting things in alphabetical order is it tends to be that whole problem of wait, what happens? I've run out of space here and I need to add more things, right? Now things like drawer boxes help enormously in this regard, because you can insert boxes in the order and not destroy your life, whereas opposed to if you have 57 conventional comic boxes and you realize that, oh my god, box number 37 is getting too tight, and what are you going to do to reshuffle the contents of 30 comic boxes in order to make that happen? No, you'd go crazy. Whereas if you had like a drawer boxes or something like that, where you could just say, all right, I'm going to insert another one into the sequence here, or I'm going to pull out this one or this two and shuffle between them. I'm not doing a lot of physical lifting. I'm not meeting my my strength goal for the day in terms of a number of deadlifts. Yes, if you do have that, it definitely helps. But if you don't, I guess if you can at least make them alphabetical within your box as much as possible, the more ways you can have it organized in order in the box, that's the less searching you'll do later. The worst thing you can do is literally just dump them in. But yeah, do what you can. It's your storage, your way of working with things is going to be different than mine. It just will be. But if like I say, if the thing you want to optimize for in the end is how efficient is it to pull it out later, damned hard to beat alphabetical. Anyway, so with that said, how store comics could be a long discussion. Absolutely true, and that could be a show in itself, if not multiples. Mike Beam says I have over 350 plus in boxes. Hopefully not per box. If it is, that means you're definitely not boarding them, or you have very strange boxes. And then people are now comparing boxes. So okay, all right. Well, that's about it, guys. All right, so all right, guys, that will do it for now. Thank you so much for doing this one. If you enjoyed it, please, again, hit like and subscribe. And also, please, if you have not checked out before, go on over to X and look for ComicBase, or Comic Software is our tag on that one, and give us a follow. We're trying to post more news on that one there, and we have some really interesting stuff we're thinking about for this year. So do give it a look there, and that's actually going to be the place where general news about ComicBase, where I feel like I don't want to bug you guys too much just using the program. But if we just have something like we just want to kibitz because it's neat, that's typically the place that we will go to post that sort of thing. So give us a follow on X. It's kind of cool. Oh, and also, if you're watching this one and you haven't taken advantage of our holiday sale yet, we're doing something we have not done in a million years. Is we're actually running a New Year's sale, and we're letting it run a little bit. So it's still going right now. You can save, like, this is like Black Friday level price savings on the whole thing, and we're letting it go for a few more days yet. So let her go. Check that out over at www.comicbase.com, and that will do it. So guys, we'll see you on the next one. You guys take care. Bye-bye.